everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Capricorn and your moon in Gemini. And this is quite an odd couple of a combination because in astrology, Gemini and Capricorn form what is called an inconjunction, meaning that they are 150 degrees apart, these two signs. Now, that will depend on the individual who has this combination. Some of you will not have the official inconjunction because you might have an early degree sun in Capricorn, a late degree moon in Gemini, and you might even, in that particular case, you might even have an opposition because if your moon is a late degree of Gemini, it's going to be very close to Cancer, and you have an early degree of Capricorn. Cancer and Capricorn are opposite signs. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, the point is that even if you don't even look at that angle, pardon the pun, these two signs, and that's why it is considered an inconjunction, they're so different. So what we're talking about here is somebody with a sun in cardinal earth and their moon is in mutable air. Speaking on the inconjunction, one of the reasons that's considered an inconjunction is because the elements involved are considered, quite incompatible with one another in that they don't have anything in common. So we're talking about earth and air. Well, I beg to differ, and I've actually discussed inconjunctions in the past and how I can usually find common ground between them. In this particular case, one of the things that I have realized with earth and air signs, and this can be if like two people, you have like a couple and one person's earth and one person's air, is that the one thing that they have in common is that neither of those signs or elements are very emotional. They have quite a bit of emotional detachment. And the reason this is significant is because we're talking in this particular case about somebody who has a moon, which is the emotional nature, and an air sign, which can be very abstract and be very detached. But the sun in earth can be very dry, or especially a sign like Capricorn can be very dry, which means that this combination is going to lend itself to someone who isn't very reactive in life. Now, there might be some other things going on that could change that, color that slightly, because you also have a Mercury sign. That can be the way you express yourself. What if that is in Sagittarius? Because Mercury is always very close to the sun. So if the sun is in Capricorn, it can't be too far from Capricorn. Maybe you have Venus in Scorpio, and that's a water sign, or in Pisces, which is, another water sign. Mars might be in a fire or water sign, which is more emotional. So the point is that, and your rising sign can be anything. These are the personal points that comprise the core personality traits of a person. So you do have to look at everything because sometimes it's not going to be as cut and dried as I make it out to be when I talk about these combinations. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there first and foremost. So let's talk about what the sun represents. The sun represents our aspirational self. Our aspirations are our goals. The sun is our masculine influence, which we would look at as the goals that a person is pursuing, because goals are, putting yourself out there in the world and going after something. That's a very kind of a yang or a yang type of behavior, a masculine type of behavior. The feminine, the yin, is more within oneself. It's more introverted. So that's why the moon is yin, and it is our emotional nature, because our emotional nature is personal to us. The masculine nature is shared with the world in a more obvious way, and it's really where you're shining your light. Capricorn in astrology rules the 10th house of career, so career tends to be very important to Capricorns. And I have met my fair share of Capricorns in my day, and yeah, I have met Capricorns who, for one reason or the other, don't really exemplify that kind of ambition ultimately. But if you look at their life, the trajectory of their life, there might have been a time when they went for it, when they tried, and because of other extenuating circumstances, they didn't, accomplish what maybe they set out to do, but they still may have been ambitious nonetheless, at least at one point in their life. Sometimes people give up, and there would be nobody harder than themselves than a Capricorn who feels like they did not fulfill their ambitions, because the fact that Capricorn rules the career sector says a lot. Capricorn's ruler is Saturn, so it tends to make Capricorn people overly serious. You do have to look at the rising sign to get a better feel for that, because if the rising sign is Gemini or Libra or Sagittarius or something else that's more like upbeat, that's going to kind of counter that. At least it can be somewhat of a mask. And definitely having the moon in Gemini lightens the person's demeanor for sure. One celebrity I know who has this combination, I believe who has it, is Joan Baez, who some younger people may not know who that is. She was a famous folk singer. You could say she still is a famous folk singer, because at the time of this recording, she is still on planet Earth and still doing her thing. But she's up there in age, that's for sure. And the reason I even talk about her is because I read her autobiography multiple times, and I could tell that she had kind of this, I wouldn't call it a quirky side, but it's just a very, very kind of somebody who loves to maybe tell stories. Of course, folk music is that kind of a genre anyway, but she, I'm not surprised that she wrote an autobiography, because Gemini is the sign of the writer, so that would make perfect sense. And the moon is the creative channel, also intuitive. And I believe those two things go together quite a bit. So I actually think this is a good combination in one sense, that it will lighten the person's emotional nature so that they don't take themselves and the world and other people so seriously. Because Capricorns, either they feel that they are, in the middle of accomplishing something, and they're very organized and disciplined, and they don't want any kind of distractions, or they just kind of scoff at frivolity. But it's the thing about it, it doesn't take much for a Capricorn to find something frivolous. So having fun is not frivolous. I mean, if you are a workaholic, you can burn yourself out, you can be imbalanced in your life and not have proper, I said imbalanced, and I said don't have proper balance. Well, duh. But I mean, you're not going to give your time and attention to all areas of life. You're going to just hyper focus on one thing. And what if you have a family? Then you might neglect them, or a spouse, or a hobby that you really enjoy. So it kind of narrows life too much. This combination, I could see it with somebody who is ambitious about being a writer. And this brings up a good point, because I actually know somebody, and I don't know them personally, but I know of them, who is an artist and is a Capricorn sun sign. I'm not quite sure what the moon is in. I think it's in Aries or something like that. So I'm not, the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to have Gemini moon for me to talk about this. But when somebody has a Capricorn sun sign, I wouldn't automatically think of them in any kind of artistic field, because art is one of those things that is kind of like being a mystic, or like a healer, in that it is off the beaten path. It's not what most people do. And, you tend to not go to university to major in art, although people do. People can major in theater, and they can graduate and do all of that good stuff. But what I'm saying is that you don't have to do it. And some people, probably most artists, do not go to college to practice their art form. And in other words, it isn't a cookie cutter type of a situation. And Capricorns, I think, may gravitate usually towards these kind of prefabricated routes to success, meaning that, like a particular career that's all ready for you to step into. All you have to do is get those credentials, like a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, getting some kind of certification, what have you. And then you can step into that role. So there's like an unpredictable quality to these other types of paths. And that's not usually what Capricorn wants. Capricorn is looking for something that is tried and true. And that, so there's that respectability factor that a lot of people do not give to the creative arts necessarily. They might respect somebody if they become successful at it, but in the process, it's not necessarily something that people encourage or feel, or admire necessarily, unless a person has made it. But because you have the moon in Gemini, this can certainly loosen you up, so to speak, because the moon can represent your need for security. How does that manifest? Security meaning, what you need to feel safe. So if somebody has a moon in Cancer, if somebody has a moon in Taurus, they're going to probably gravitate towards a career that is very, when I say predictable or reliable, maybe that's a better word. It's something where a person feels that they can show up to work and they'll get a steady paycheck and everything is going to be right down the line like that. And of course, if you're an actor, you may star in a play and it can close down as soon as it opens, like Broadway, off-Broadway, any kind of theater. And even if it's is a year-long run, it's temporary. And then you have to get something else. Or if you're a musician, you go from gig to gig. But Gemini, it's kind of like different with Gemini. what makes you feel secure may be variety, because Gemini is a mutable sign, so it welcomes change. And emotionally, if you don't have kind of that variety in your life, if you have monotony, that would probably affect your mental health. It would probably make you feel anxious or depressed, because and that is like kind of an overgeneralization, because maybe, let's say you were you have other placements that are more that are more steady and things like that, then perhaps that wouldn't be as big a deal. Okay, like Mars and Scorpio or something like that. That's another fixed sign. I said another fixed sign. That is a fixed sign. So I'm just saying that in a general way, but that is what gives your life kind of that juiciness, to have variety, things that are not so set in stone, where you can change. That's another big feature of Gemini, is changeability. One of the things that I have noticed about the moon in Gemini is that it tends to be fickle, meaning that the emotions are not very stable, in the sense, I'm not talking about somebody who's, has bipolar or something, where their mood, like, what do they call that? Mood swings. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way that you feel about things. You can even look at them as your opinions about things. I read something about Vedic astrology, that the moon can be the memory or the mind or something like that. And I've been making these connections between the moon and Mercury in terms of, which comes first, the memories or the emotions. So in a sense, they're almost interchangeable sometimes. And think about it. Like, if you like something, and it could be as superficial, like liking a certain type of food, and then you may eat it a lot or something like that, and then all of a sudden you kind of like stop liking it. Maybe you get tired of it, maybe you have something that's bad, and then you kind of like, it puts you off to it. What is that? Is that a thought? Is there something emotional because you're feeling a certain way towards it? And certainly with people, we can have opinions about people that affect the way that we feel about them, and they can change. So sometimes that's one of the, when I talk about being fickle, a person in particular, this combination, well, it's not because of this combination. I'm talking about the moon specifically being in Gemini. So this could be for maybe anybody with the moon in Gemini. But the moon in Gemini can mean that you decide that you don't want to be with somebody after all, that you really aren't in love with them, that you really aren't attracted to them. And it just kind of like, it might even just hit you out of the blue. And that can wreak havoc on your love life, because you may find it hard to stay with someone, to stick with someone. You may find it easier just to kind of go from person to person, like a bee goes from flower to flower. Again, that's going to depend on other factors, and where your sun is in the chart, and where your moon is, where your Venus is, all of that good stuff. So going back to ambition, this combination may favor some, especially with the arts, I would say first and foremost writers. And this could be also with Gemini, maybe the spoken word, so poets, well, that's a form of writing, I suppose. Maybe even the theater, because that involves writing. But anything that you do, you may have a versatility with it. Some people, I was talking about not Gemini, Capricorns being overly serious, but the truth is that Capricorns can be very, very funny people because there's like a droll sense of humor, which means that kind of, you could say mock serious, but there it really is kind of serious. And I was just thinking of Cary Grant. I wonder if he had the moon in Gemini. I don't know. But he was, a heartthrob from a prior era. If you've ever seen North by Northwest with, by Hitchcock, and I know that I'm pretty sure he was in multiple Hitchcock movies, but he was, a really handsome man. But he had this witty delivery that I loved. I kind of think of somebody like Clark Gable, who we know him mostly from Gone with the Wind. He was an Aquarian, another air sign, but sun, not moon. I don't know what his moon sign was in. But the point is that the air signs are connected with communication. So this combination, another thing can be somebody who's a radio host, a disc jockey, a podcaster, like a YouTuber, anything where the person is disseminating information. And that, especially even like an educator, a professor, anything like that, you would excel in, because Capricorn respects tradition. And if you have Mercury in Capricorn, you're really going to be well organized in your thoughts. And so that will affect your delivery, being able to kind of lay things out in a very orderly kind of a way. And because Capricorn does have that serious nature, there can be cynicism with Capricorns that is kind of expressed through humor, through snark. Gemini moon can be sarcastic about certain things in life that can be these heavy topics. And so maybe you're somebody who can make light of things that are very serious and be a great stand-up comedian. And what I was trying to say, because I just do these off the top of my head, what I was getting at when I was talking about art and Capricorns is that somebody can be extremely talented, but if they're not disciplined, they're not going to have consistent output. They're not going to apply themselves in terms of being able to promote their work, whatever it is that they're doing. They're just going to be kind of spinning their wheels, maybe. And I'm sure there are a lot of artists out there who, because they don't have a game plan, they are kind of, running around in circles. They're not really, there's no real game plan. There's no organization. And even the person's get up and go, or, going for it, that might be lacking too. And so that can impede a person's ability to make things happen. You have to actually take those steps. And cardinal signs like Capricorn go after things, because cardinal signs are catalysts. They're go-getters. They're the ones who take action in the zodiac. In terms of love, Capricorns tend to be family-oriented and traditional and want those things. The only thing that I think would maybe delay that is your career goals. And, look to some placements in the chart for more information or other placements. The thing is that this combination I wouldn't call the most romantic in the sun-moon combination. So you have a very pragmatic way of looking at things. You may feel like, you might be in your mind a lot because of, in terms of your emotional nature, because you have the moon in Gemini. So that can lead to abstract thinking, which means that the person is thinking in concepts, not necessarily in the actual reality of the situation, but in like these concepts. I would say especially related to Capricorn ideals. And if you have Mercury in Capricorn, Mercury is a ruler of Gemini, so that can really influence the way you feel about things. If it's in Capricorn, you may feel that I should start a family. I'm 30 now. I should start it. Not saying anything about, oh, wow, I want to be in love and have a family. I should start a family. Look at me. I'm 30. Like pragmatic about it, or fitting into the traditional way that society tends to do things. Most people have offspring. Most people do it by the time they're X age, and this is how it's done. So is that a good thing? Is it not? Well, I personally think that, we're individuals and we don't have to conform to tradition. But at the same time, I know that there are certain tendencies for each sign. I'm a sun in Sagittarius, so that may color my views on tradition. Capricorns will be more in alignment with it, and plus, but I will say that having the moon in Gemini can make you less of a fuddy-duddy, like, a stuffed shirt, meaning that, the Capricorn vibe can be all work and no play. And this can make you more kind of clever, amusing. It may be easy for you to make people laugh, and you may enjoy kind of expressing yourself in a more lighthearted way and not all doom and gloom. So that may extend to love for you. And, maybe you want that sense of continuity, or you just like that tradition, like I said. So you may have children, but again, you may decide to delay it until you feel like you have established yourself. Okay, that's what I have for you. Oh, one last thing I want to say, and I think this is important. I think it would behoove somebody with this combination to really, think about learning meditation and, even spiritual teachings. And the reason I say this is because Gemini moon can kind of like, it can be unstable in the sense like that it can't, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, so there may be a tendency to kind of go from one emotion to another. If you've heard the term mercurial, it means changeable. And also because somebody with the moon in Gemini may tend to intellectualize their emotions. They may not really feel them. And that is something that, there's a saying, you've got to feel it to heal it. Also, I think Capricorns can be, in particular, sometimes vulnerable to depression because Saturn is very serious, like I said. And there is a restrictive quality with Saturn. So if you're thinking about the light that the sun gives off, And then Saturn kind of makes it a little bit heavier, a little bit denser. So, and I also believe, when you look at the symbol of Saturn, it looks like this anchor. Well, sometimes an anchor can kind of be like an albatross, where it's just like the person is walking around with this thing that is just dragging them down. So when, there's a light quality with Gemini, like kind of a breezy quality, and it definitely can have a good side to it, but it can also be like intellectual bypassing or psychological bypassing, where the person just makes jokes to try to escape from actually dealing with the issue at hand. So if you find that you do that, kind of look at that, because it could be actually exacerbating a negative emotion that would kind of go through you. People have mentioned the term emotion, meaning that emotions they're not like something that has to just stay put. They can actually pass through us, but sometimes people hold on to emotions inadvertently or unwittingly by not really acknowledging them, and kind of like it has to go somewhere. So being aware of the importance of processing emotions, getting in touch with your feelings is super important. And that's, when they talk about workaholism, that can be, even though we're not talking about an intoxicating substance, we're talking about, staying busy to avoid problems. You know what I mean? And does that really work? Well, I do think that there's a constructive element to it, that the person is trying to do something constructive, productive, rather than just like sitting in their room and just like ruminating. I'm not saying that that's a good idea, but being conscious of one's problems and feelings about the problems, and then really trying to kind of, deal with them in a conscious way and not trying to run away from them. Yeah, I think that's always a good thing. So I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.